Many traders convince themselves that collecting strategies is progress. They think if they learn enough approaches, breakouts, mean reversion, momentum plays, order flow setups, they'll eventually stumble into consistency. But the market doesn't reward accumulation of ideas. It rewards mastery of execution. In fact, spreading your attention across multiple setups almost guarantees you'll fail to deeply understand any of them. It's like planting 10 seeds but watering each of them just once a week. None will grow strong enough to bear fruit. When you chase multiple setups, you also confuse your own brain. One day, you're looking for reversals at extremes. The next, you're chasing breakouts. The next, you're experimenting with scalps. Your nervous system never settles because your criteria keep shifting. And when your criteria shift, so does your confidence. You're constantly doubting whether this trade fits the plan, because the plan itself keeps changing. Without consistency in process, there can't be consistency in results. This is where the power of choosing one structured trade becomes clear. When you commit to one repeatable condition, you eliminate half of the confusion instantly. You no longer need to weigh 10 different strategies in real time. Instead, you have one clear lens through which you view the market. Every chart, every session, every decision gets filtered through that one lens. This doesn't just simplify trading, it makes it sustainable. There's also a psychological benefit. Traders chasing multiple setups live in constant scarcity. They worry they'll miss out if they don't try to grab every possible trade. But in reality, this mindset causes the very overtrading and inconsistency that ruins accounts. Choosing one setup replaces scarcity with patience. You know exactly what you're waiting for. You're no longer desperate for action. You're waiting for precision. Another problem with juggling too many strategies is that your data becomes meaningless. If you trade 5 different setups, how can you know which one is actually profitable? Your wins and losses blur together into noise. But if you focus on one setup, suddenly every journal entry, every screenshot, every metric adds up to something useful. You can calculate expectancy with confidence. You can identify weaknesses in execution. You can see whether your edge is real or imagined. That clarity is priceless. And consider this. Every setup has its own nuances. One setup might perform beautifully in balanced markets, but struggle in trend days. Another might offer clean entries in the morning session, but degrade in the afternoon chop. These subtleties are invisible to the trader who dabbles. But when you specialize, you start to see these details emerge. You become intimately familiar with how your setup behaves, when it shines, and when to stay away. That intimacy is what transforms a setup into an edge. The truth is, most traders already know enough to be profitable. What they lack isn't more knowledge. It's commitment to mastering what they already know. If you think about it, trading isn't a knowledge problem. It's an execution problem. The gap isn't filled by piling on new setups. It's filled by sticking to one setup long enough to learn its lessons. That's the difference between amateurs who chase and professionals who master. So the first step is to make a decision. Pick one structured trade, not 10. Don't wait until you know more. Don't wait until you feel ready. The decision itself is what sets the foundation. Once you've chosen, you can begin the real work, testing, tracking, and building confidence through evidence. Until then, you're just wandering in circles. This commitment is uncomfortable because it feels like you're limiting yourself. But paradoxically, that limitation is where freedom begins. By narrowing your focus, you gain control over your process. And when you control your process, you finally give yourself a chance to grow. One of the greatest lies traders tell themselves is that more opportunities equal more profits. In reality, more opportunities usually equal more mistakes. Every additional setup you chase dilutes your focus and increases the chances you'll mis-execute. When you spread your attention thin, you're never fully prepared for any of them. This is why so many traders end up overtrading, underperforming, and burning out. Choosing one setup forces you to slow down. It demands that you learn to wait for your condition, even if it means sitting on your hands while the market moves without you. At first, this feels painful. You'll feel like you're missing out. But over time, this discipline rewires your relationship with the market. You stop measuring success by how many trades you take, and you start measuring it by how well you execute your one setup. That shift is profound. Focusing on one setup also makes journaling a weapon instead of a chore. If every trade in your journal relates to the same structure, your notes compound. You start seeing recurring themes. You notice which times of day it performs best, which market environments add risk, and which entry triggers deliver the cleanest outcomes. Over a few months, your journal evolves from scattered notes into a trading manual written in your own language. That's edge building. There's another benefit too. Risk becomes predictable. If you've studied your setup in depth, you know exactly where your stop belongs. You know the typical size of a loss, the average win, and the common failure points. This makes it easier to size consistently and avoid the emotional roller coaster of random risk-taking. Predictability builds trust, and trust in your system is what keeps you from flinching in live markets. Choosing one structured trade also accelerates learning. Instead of starting over with a new learning curve every few weeks, you stack repetitions of the same process. Each repetition builds skill. Each mistake refines your approach, and each success reinforces your discipline. Over time, you become fluent in your setup the way a musician becomes fluent in one instrument. Mastery isn't built by dabbling, it's built by repetition. This repetition also breeds intuition, not the random hunch-based intuition that leads to gambling, but the grounded kind that comes from deep exposure. You start to sense when the market is aligning with your setup before it's fully obvious. You notice subtle tells, micro shifts, and changes in tempo. That intuition is only available to specialists, not generalists. It's the hidden edge that comes from commitment. The hardest part, however, is resisting the temptation to add more before you're ready. There will always be another shiny setup that looks easier or more exciting. But until your first setup is fully proven, adding more is sabotage. It resets your learning curve to zero and destroys the progress you've made. The discipline is not in knowing more. It's in doing less with greater consistency. Here's the deeper truth. Choosing one setup forces you to confront yourself. When you can't hide behind variety, you see your mistakes with clarity. You can't blame the strategy or the market for inconsistency. You have to look in the mirror. And that confrontation, while uncomfortable, is exactly what accelerates growth. Simplicity shines a spotlight on your discipline. And remember, one setup is enough. There are traders who've built entire careers trading just a single condition. Because if the condition has expectancy, your job isn't to reinvent it, it's to exploit it consistently. That's what trading is. Repetition of a proven edge. Everything else is distraction. Let's imagine two traders. Trader A studies 10 setups at once. He spends hours each weekend scanning for new strategies, tweaking his plan, and trying to memorize rules for every possible condition. Trader B, on the other hand, chooses one setup. He journals it, backtests it, and executes it day after day. After 6 months, Trader A is still confused, still inconsistent, and still stuck in the learning curve. Trader B, he's fluent. He's built confidence through repetition. He has a real edge. This is the difference between dabbling and mastery. Dabblers stay at the surface. Masters go deep. And in trading, depth always wins. Because while the dabbler is still figuring out whether this trade even fits his plan, the master has already executed without hesitation. That speed, that clarity, that confidence, it's worth more than a dozen half-baked strategies. Another hidden advantage of focusing on one setup is that it makes adaptation easier later on. Once you've mastered one condition, you know what real proof of concept feels like. You know how to test, track, and validate. You can then apply that same process to a second setup and a third, but now you're adding from a position of strength. Instead of randomness, you're stacking proven edges. That's how professional traders expand. Identity is also shaped here. Most struggling traders think of themselves as market chasers. They see themselves as trying to catch whatever move comes. But when you master one setup, you start to identify as a specialist. That identity shift changes how you act, how you think, and even how you speak about your trading. You stop saying, "I trade the market," and start saying, "I trade my setup." That shift matters. The ultimate goal isn't to trade everything, it's to trade something well. That's what creates consistency. That's what creates sustainability. And that's what gives you the confidence to withstand the ups and downs of this business. Because when you know your setup, losses don't shake you. They're just part of the expectancy. Without that anchor, every loss feels personal. Every mistake feels final. With it, you stay grounded. This grounding gives you something rare in trading: peace of mind. Instead of waking up in panic, scanning for every possible opportunity, you know exactly what you're looking for. The noise fades into the background. You can watch other traders chase every wiggle, but you no longer feel the need to join them. That peace allows you to conserve mental energy for when it truly matters, when your setup appears. And over time, that peace compounds. Trading becomes less about the constant search and more about patient execution. You stop being tossed around by the randomness of the market because you're anchored in something solid. That anchor is your setup, and once you've proven it and mastered it, it's strong enough to weather the storms that take other traders out of the game. So here's the challenge. Stop chasing. Stop diluting your focus across strategies you haven't proven. Choose one structured trade. Do the work. Build the proof. And then execute it with discipline. That's the primary process in action. And if you stick to it, it can change your trading and your life more than any secret strategy ever could.